the governor's action that allows us to have this meeting tonight?
Sure. So the pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on number of people that may gather in one place, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this meeting. Town hall is closed to the public. Board members may participate in the meeting remotely. As this meeting will be accessible to the public via the Zoom online option, and that online option is both posted on the agenda and on the town's website.
Jim, could you just remind the audience to keep their phones muted so we don't have it coming up in the background if they're speaking?
Absolutely, and if I do notice that there's some noise coming from folks not on the board, don't be offended if I mute you, and you can there will certainly be time for public comment.
Jim, can you bring us up to date on the first action item? Is the Bellingham Shores Major Residential Development Special Permit Definitive Subdivision and Stormwater Management Plan. This is a continued public hearing. Sure.
So at the last meeting, if you recall, we requested that the applicant renotice to the certified abutters list that is 300 feet surrounding the property line. We did receive confirmation that that was completed. In addition, they did refresh the signage that's out there, the yellow signs that you see along the different borders of the property. And since that time, we asked for our peer review engineer to start diving into some of the details, the stormwater and the traffic. And they have had an opportunity to do that, although we did just receive it yesterday, the peer review, our engineer's comments back. So it might be a little premature to dive too much into the stormwater aspects of it, but there's certainly some other details of the project that we can dive into, and I believe the applicant has a presentation prepared for us this evening. So if I can unmute or request to unmute Jeff Roloffs and Sean Malone, there you are.
Jim, what I'd like to do is have them go through their presentation and hold off on asking questions until the end.
Okay.
So for the board members in the audience, if you have any questions, could you please write them down?
Excellent. And Jeff and Sean, is it okay if I'll just pull up the presentation provided?
Perfect. That'd be great. Thank you, Jim. And I'm going to step back and let Sean Malone take the lead.
Here. Can the board members see that okay?
I can.
Yes.
Everyone else?
Yep, good.
Okay. I guess without further ado, I'll start proceeding through the presentation. For the record, Sean Malone, Oak Consulting Group, the civil engineer for the project. Can we go to the next slide, Jeff? Or Jim, sorry. So just to quickly reorient people, everybody knows where we're talking about, but it's a 146-acre parcel between South Main Street, Center Street, Cross Street, and Silver Lake Road in Bellingham, proximate to Silver Lake. Next slide, please. So the total acreage we're talking about, again, is 146 acres. It's a 103 unit proposed clustered subdivision in MRD. There'll be 2 access points, one on South Main Street and a second on Cross Street. As part of this project, approximately 92 acres of land would be preserved as perpetual open space. Much of this is forested land. There's wetlands that will be protected. There's a stream with a riverfront area, which will be completely protected. There'll also be the perimeter buffer around the whole property, providing screening and buffering for the project from not only the direct abutters, primarily on Center Street, but also the roadways, which the project site abides on South Main Street, Center Street, and Cross Street. Next slide, please, Jim. And as I said, there's approximately 93 acres of land that would be preserved as open space as part of this project. We've divided this up into 3 areas. Area 1, which is the main portion of the site, if you would, the center consists of about 76.5 acres of wooded land. A second area we're calling Area 2 is approximately 8.8 acres, and what this consists of is the perimeter buffer around the abutting properties on South Main Street, Center Street, and Cross Street. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. And then the third piece of open space that'll be preserved is 7.62 acres in what we've been calling the triangle lot, which directly abuts Silver Lake. One thing I'd like to point out on this, as part of this open space calculation, we have removed the area of the existing detention basin that was constructed as part of Candlelight, the Candlelight Lane project. So that basin area is not counted as open space for this project. The open space for this would consist of approximately 63.6% of the total land area. The stormwater management will be handled with a closed drain system, deep sump catch basins draining to some large infiltration areas. We have 2 infiltration areas shown. These will be large grass basins that will allow the stormwater to flow and then infiltrate into the ground. We've done some extensive test pitting since we've last talked. We have done 21 additional test pits from what we have done previously. So I think our total is up around 90 or 95 test pits total that have been done on site. The stormwater management system has been peer reviewed by BSC. We got some good comments back from them. We've made some slight revisions, added some additional detail, and we believe that we are fully compliant with the Mass Stormwater regulations. BSC did have a couple additional comments from our last submission, but I think these were really just, and I don't want to speak for them, but in my opinion, these were pretty minor, just some additional little details that need to be addressed to kind of put the bow on the stormwater management system. But again, believe it's fully compliant with the stormwater regulations. And as part of that, we have a decrease in both the rate and volume of stormwater coming from the project site and the post-development condition. As part of this most recent submission, based on the comments from the board as well as BSC, we've developed a phasing program for the project. This plan shows 3 phases of the project. And in these phases, we have outlined the construction phase, stockpiling areas, laydown areas, and temporary stormwater management areas. And just to give a little idea of where we're coming from on this is, we understand that it's in everybody's interest to try to minimize the area of disturbed area at any one time. So we've divided the project into 3 areas. The first being coming from Cross Street and moving into the site. And the reason starting there is that's where our sewer is going to be going out, and our sewer is going to be ending up out onto Cross Street. So start there and then move to the left as you're looking at this page. So construct the green area, that's phase 1. Phase 2 would be the pink area, which would be the loop road around the backside of the site, that second stormwater basin, and the connection to South Main Street. And then the last phase would be the interior portion of the loop that would utilize all the infrastructure that was installed in the previous phases. With BSC's last comments, there were a few suggested conditions, I think, and I think they're good ones, good suggestions. Providing a stormwater pollution prevention plan to the town prior to any work being conducted. We will be importing fill material onto this site. So we'll be preparing a traffic management plan, a stockpiling plan with a little bit more detail than what's shown here. This is kind of a general plan to get things going, to start thinking about it, and then a construction schedule that would be discussed with the town and DPW and get everybody on board. These things would have to be coordinated with the contractor once all that's on board. So this is really something that would have to happen right before we got in the ground here. This is just the plan of the excuse me, erosion control and some of the notes that was submitted as part of the plan. This outlines temporary seeding and stabilization methods, temporary sediment traps, things of that nature that would be incorporated into the construction. We had gotten some comments from the board and talking with Jim and town staff about the perimeter buffer, the MRD buffer, principally around the abutting lots on Center Street. So what this plan shows is how this buffer can be maintained. And to take a step back, from what we understand, is part of the concern was that after construction, this buffer is going to be within these lots. It's going to be privately owned. So how can the town enforce or ensure that the buffer will be maintained? So what this plan shows is our original lot lines. So the buffer would still be within private lots. However, we would have a deed restriction in each of the lots where that affects this buffer, and that's what's shown in the purple. Additionally, we would put monument markers in the ground. Those are shown in the red dots, as you see on the green line, which is the buffer, to identify it as a restricted area. And we also have a retaining wall shown in the middle. It's kind of a blue line that would be a physical barrier from somebody wanting to expand their backyards. So that was one way that we think that the buffer can be protected. But in looking at it and talking to Jim and thinking about it, we also developed this second solution. And what this would do is reduce the 100-foot buffer to 75 feet in 3 locations. And that would be just to the far left of the plan that you're looking right there. Thank you. Perfect. And in the middle of the site, right there. Yep. And then over on the right-hand side. And with this, what we would do is then reduce the lot sizes that abut this buffer. So this buffer would then be incorporated into the deeded open space. So it wouldn't be part of private lots. It would be deeded open space, which I believe would come under the control of the Conservation Commission. So in doing this, we'd also be able to provide some backyard space. I think we had approximately 40 to 50 feet at least for each of these houses. So a homeowner wouldn't necessarily be inclined or feel like they have to expand their yard to get a little bit more for their yard. So this is what we feel is the better option, the preferred option. It adds another 5.1 acres to the open space of the project, and think it could be a better manageable solution. We'd still have minimum lot sizes of about 10,000 square feet, which we feel is probably a good, still a minimal marketable lot for this area. So we'd be requesting a waiver to allow a 75-foot buffer in lieu of 100 in these 3 locations. This is that same plan, but we overlaid it on an ortho photograph to kind of give an idea of what's already out there. And what's out there is there's already a lot of buffer. It's pretty well treed, and even in the areas where we'd be requesting the 75-foot buffer, there is still a significant amount of buffer and vegetation and separation from the abutting properties and the abutting structures. So what we did on this is we cut 3 sections labeled here AA, BB, and CC. And we can go to the next slide and show what we're looking at. So this is the AA section, and we looked at the worst case scenarios, if you would. So this is showing the reduced buffer up towards South Main Street. Again, still a 75-foot solid vegetated buffer. We actually have a little bit additional that would be past the property line and still be able to maintain a 50 or so foot rear yard for the proposed house, which would be 67 feet from the property line. In BB, similar situation. This has also some additional buffer that's on that abutting property. They have a garage in the back there that's at the far back of their property. But again, still a good healthy buffer between the project and the abutter, and be able to provide a decent backyard for the proposed house. And lastly, same situation, solid buffer. Our site goes down from those. We're a little bit lower than the abutting residences, so we think that the intent of the buffer can certainly be maintained and enforced with this proposal. So as part of the project, we heard right from the very beginning about pedestrian access and pedestrian travel. So we've developed plans for sidewalks from the project site, first on the left-hand side up to Douglas Drive. This is a fairly easy sidewalk to construct. It'd be all within the right-of-way, and the applicant has committed to do that as part of the project. The other one that was discussed was down Cross Street from the project entrance down to Silver Lake. And we developed some plans for that. And in doing so, we identified that there's already some existing encroachments into the right-of-way with driveways, and it's very narrow and kind of strange right-of-way, if you would, for lack of a better term. But we've prepared those plans. We've had that reviewed by DPW. they've come back with an estimate of that sidewalk would be approximately $400,000 to construct. And what the applicant is prepared to agree to is they will construct that sidewalk down Cross Street if the project is, approved as proposed. But we would be looking for the town to obtain any necessary easements and permits for that. So again, we would be willing to construct that project, $400,000 value, if the project is approved as proposed. And with that, I guess I will say, before we turn it over to Kim to talk about the traffic, Jim, do we want to ask the board about any questions on the site?
Well, it's up to you. Would you care to continue on, or do you want to stop for questions?
Let's start for questions from the board and the public on what we've seen so far. I'd like to start with Brian. Can you unmute yourself, my friend?
Yep. I have a couple questions. With regard to the phasing, can you tell me what the underlying, is there a certain math that's going into it, or the underlying rationale for the number of homes in each one and the different sections?
Yes, there wasn't really any math to it. It wasn't a number of homes. It was really had to do more with the infrastructure and the logical construction of the infrastructure. So bringing it in from Cross Street, that's where the sewer is going. We stopped it at a logical roadway intersection. So that would be one phase, and then pick that up and carry that through the next phase. So to answer your question, it wasn't based on houses or an economic analysis. It was more of a constructability analysis.
What would be the second phase?
The second phase would be the, I guess the interior loop. Is it possible to bring that plan back up, Jim?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the green portion over on the right-hand side, the upper right-hand side, that would be the first phase. So that's where the sewer and water are coming in from Cross Street. The stormwater management basin would be constructed and bring the roadway and that infrastructure into a logical point of ending. Then the second phase would be the pink, which would be continuing the sewer, because the sewer runs from South Main Street through that back loop and into that green portion out to Cross Street. So that pink portion, and because that has the stormwater basin, get all that constructed, stabilized, and then move into the final phase, the southernmost portion of the, or I guess the easternmost, or westernmost portion of the project as the final phase.
Okay. I'm generally concerned about phasing a large number of homes in one phase, or a large swath of land, because in other projects we've run into the problem of phases being constructed and then stalled, and I'm just concerned that the phasing might be a little too large. It might be something that you might want to look into. In terms of, and this might be a little, well, actually, if I can talk about the buffer, will there be a housing association?
Jeff, can you respond to that? I think there would be one to start with, but I think ultimately this is expected to be town streets.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it depends how the town wants to handle the open space, the deeded open space, because in the zoning bylaw, the town has discretion as to whether it wants to take title to that area. For example, by, through its conservation commission, which is when Sean mentioned that as the most likely scenario, that makes sense to me. If the town doesn't want to take title to it, the whole open space could be put into an open space trust, which it would then consist of the homeowners. So that would be the only reason that there would be a homeowners association. If, that's all assuming that the town is going to end up taking the roadway and the drainage infrastructure here, which
Okay.
is what I think the town's preference is.
Yeah, I think it's always been contemplated that, as Sean mentioned, it would be a HOA at first, and then once it's completed, they bring it to town meeting, it gets accepted, and at that point, it's turned over to the town for continued maintenance.
So I appreciate the buffering. I think it's important for the people that on Center Street to have that. I think practically speaking, and I'm open to suggestions, but practically speaking, I think that 25 years from now, say, the houses are sold a couple times over, that people are going to forget that the strip of land running between the newer development and the existing homes are conservation land. And I'm kind of leaning towards having a physical barrier like that wall that was discussed to in the monuments and other things like that, and the deed restriction. I think that's just, practically speaking, a better way of preventing a future homeowner from clearing that. But I'm open to suggestions. And then with regard to the sidewalk on South Main Street, if I was leaving the project and I was taking a left out of South Main Street, is there any plans to pave that, or is there a sidewalk from the project to Center Street?
No, there was no plans for that. So I'm not sure that leads anywhere. I think the idea with proceeding up to Douglas, it then continues on up towards the school and in that way. So there was kind of a destination.
Okay. And then just general comments in terms of the layout of the property. I'd really like to see, and this could be premature, a bit of character to the neighborhood. And I know that the house positioning may not be exactly as it's shown on the now, but staggered homes, street trees, maybe more than the minimum. If you could give us the styles of homes that might be going in, pocket park, things like that. Something so we're not just seeing a row of new houses with two tiny trees in the front. You know what I mean? So something to that effect would be helpful to see as well.
Okay.
Dennis? Do you have any questions, Dennis?
No, I'm good at this time.
Phil?
Point of clarification on the major stormwater basin in the phasing. Is that going to be constructed during phase 3? That's part of phase 3. Is that correct?
Phase 2.
Phase-
Phase 2. That one would be part of phase 2. And then we would have the other basin as part of phase 1.
Okay. I guess I would probably like to hear from peer review at some point about the water flow during construction, only because the major stormwater feature of this site, it would not be up and running for the first phase. I understand the first phase does have a basin over there, but it's not the major basin of the project.
Yeah, yes, and it's a little difficult to see on this plan at this scale, but what this also shows is temporary basins incorporated to each phase with swales and berms to direct stormwater into these temporary basins. So the final basin wouldn't be used during construction. We would have these temporary basins, and again, they're shown schematically on this plan, but then that would be further refined with the stormwater pollution prevention plan that would be provided to the town.
Do we have a copy of those temporary ones during construction at this point?
Yes, they're shown on this plan, and then we have a detail in our plan set as well,
Okay,
a general detail.
all right. It is concerning with the water, so I'll look at that. Thank you.
Okay.
That's my points.
Russ, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Or a comment first, and I do echo the concerns about a careful sort of phased approach. But in regards to the infrastructure required for phase one, or the infrastructure required to start, is that the infrastructure that's required for phase one, or how much infrastructure do you need?
When I say the infrastructure, I was primarily talking about the water and sewer and the connection to the town utilities. These would all be connected over onto Cross Street, so that's why we would start there and then move kind of northwest. The other aspects of infrastructure would also be the stormwater basins and the catch basins and things like that would be installed.
But the other phases don't need to be cleared until you get there?
They don't need to be.
Thank you. That's all. That's the only other question I had.
Liz?
Yeah, I had a question about timing. When are you hoping to start phase one of this project if it ends up being phased?
I think as soon as possible, as soon as permits are in place and we've met all the conditions of the approval, I think we'd like to get going.
And you may not have an answer to this question, but I know in other communities, they're starting to need to submit COVID-19 safety regulation reports and things for construction sites now. Is that something that we're going to have to address moving forward?
Possibly.
Okay.
I mean, I think like everybody, the crystal ball is cloudy right now, but we anticipate as a condition of this approval, we'll have some pre-construction requirements like the traffic management plan, the temporary stockpile management plan, the construction schedule. And as part of that, a COVID-19 plan may need to be developed as well.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
I have quite a few questions. I want to thank you for working with us on the test bits. And I said I have quite a few. This has been floating around, this development, for how many years?
Wow, there's
One
been,
iteration or another?
yeah, there's been, I haven't been involved in that, but I would say in various forms for a decade plus.
In a strange way, you have a confluence of events that may benefit you. And I think we need to sort of address that. By this taking so long, being in the COVID environment right now, we're going to see a lot of people want to leave areas with dense populations. And they want to move out to quieter areas with bigger backyards. And the reason I bring that up is the buffer area. The way you count the buffer area on the 100-foot buffer sort of bothers me. You're counting it as a buffer, but you're also reducing it as usable land for a homeowner. So in essence, they're going to maintain it, but they don't really own it. In essence, if they want to put a pool back there or a hockey rink, and it's a quarter-acre lot, you're somewhat restricted. And the concept of counting it twice sort of bothers me. In regards to counting it twice, Jim, can you go back to the original map? Keep pointing up to the area up the north middle, the infamous triangle. That area, it's been part of one development, part of another development. Jim, where do we stand with that right now?
So I did sit down with Sean after our last meeting because we knew that the board had some concerns about that, and obviously we pointed out some concerns on that. And we have, or Sean has gone back, got the accurate as-built of what's out there today. So that detention basin has expanded quite a bit over the years for the abutting project, and so what they have there now does accurately reflect what's out there. So the carved out gray area in that triangle, which I could try and point out there, reflects the riprap and the detention basin and what have you there. So as we see it, that green does accurately reflect what could constitute open space. Granted, it was heavily disturbed during the last project, or the current project ongoing right now.
So are they counting it once or counting it twice?
So, I mean, technically they're counting it once. It has been disturbed already, but it's only being counted as for one project now.
Will it be cleaned up before this project gets done?
That's something I could certainly talk to the general contractor about, and Sean and Jeff. I'm sure you can talk to your client about.
Also, just to let you know, I anticipate during this process a robust construction management mitigation program. And I do think moving forward, the town of Bellingham will probably incorporate a COVID-19 remuneration program as part of all their projects moving forward. Jim, you think that's viable?
Well, certainly. We've already been given a lot of guidance from the state in that regard, and I'm sure, as this evolves, we're going to get a significant amount more of guidance on how to properly allow for construction.
Where do we stand right now with Concom?
Conservation, well, technically they were on the agenda last night. However, Conservation did not meet to review the plan sets. So they are continued to June 10th is my understanding.
Okay.
So we're a little bit ahead of them at the moment.
Sean, do you have any idea on the potential impact on the school system based on your numbers?
I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Yes, please. The potential impact on the school system.
No, I don't believe we've done any analysis. Jeff, do you recall if we've done any analysis on taxes versus fees and all that?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the number of houses could have students attending our schools.
I don't have that for you.
Can we work on that, please?
Yep.
Yes.
Also, Jim, performance bonds, will that be part of this process?
Yeah, so this is more of a standard subdivision, though it's clustered in a special permit. It is a subdivision, so in a typical subdivision, as the board knows, we would require a security early on. Once they get most of the infrastructure down and start asking for occupancy permits, we would be requesting a bond.
At this point, does the public have any questions about what they've seen so far about this prior to talking about traffic? Good. Could we please continue with the traffic portion of the presentation?
I believe that's Kim, is that right?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Hazavardian with TEP LLC. I'm a traffic engineer. I've worked in Bellingham before, and I wrote the traffic impact and access study and conducted its analysis. The traffic study, I'm going to give an overview of it, and I'd be happy to answer any more detailed questions. The traffic study was a pretty standard study. It reflected practice of the Institute of Transportation Engineers and Massachusetts Department of Transportation. The study area included the following intersections: South Main Street and Blackstone Street, the signalized intersection; South Main Street and Easy Street; South Main Street and Douglas Drive; South Main Street and Glenbrook Avenue. That intersection would have a proposed road from the development coming out opposite Glenbrook to create a four-legged intersection. South Main Street and Center, South Main Street Center Street and Cross Street, and Cross Street and the proposed road. So there'd be two access points. One would be to South Main Street opposite Glenbrook, and the other would be on Cross Street. The analysis looked at the weekday AM and PM peak hours, as is typical, under the following conditions: 2020 existing, 2027 no build, that's with background traffic growth, but without the proposed development, and 2027 build, that adds the proposed development. Now, as far as the future growth in the area, we assumed a 1% annual growth rate and build out of the Lakeview Estates project. We looked at site distances for the access points, and they were fine. We did accident research for the study area intersections and found below average crash rates, with about 87% of the accidents being property damage only. The rest injuries, but not fatal injuries. We conducted trip generation analysis, let me just switch to the place in the report where I cover that, because I don't remember the numbers offhand. It's 103 residential units, and rough numbers. A residential project would generate about one trip per unit during the AM peak hour, one trip per unit during the PM peak hour. And the numbers we have, which are back in table, bear with me for 1 second here. Back in table 5, we're talking 78 trips during the morning peak hour, 19 in and 59 out, and 105 trips during the PM peak hour, 66 in, 39 out. Now, that doesn't mean that each dwelling unit is only going to generate roughly one trip in the morning and one trip in the afternoon. What happens is those, if there are, let's say, 2 cars in a house, those trips won't necessarily all happen within 1 hour. They might be spread out over 2 or 3 hours. So that's why 103 houses doesn't generate 206 vehicle trips all during 1 hour. We distributed the trips around the study area network, and we relied on Census Bureau journey to work data and basically online directional routing. We basically asked for directions. How do you get to a certain town from this part of Bellingham? We put all those numbers together on networks for the AM and PM peak hours under those existing no build and build conditions, and we ran capacity analysis using the procedures of the Highway Capacity Manual and Synchro software. And we calculated levels of service, delays, and queues for all the study area intersections. In a nutshell, the project did not have a significant overall impact on traffic. The number of trips generated is not a large number in traffic engineers' terms, and those trips distribute over the road network. One more thing, BSC has reviewed the traffic impact study, and their comments, I would view them as minor, and we will be responding to the comments. That concludes my brief presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
If I could ask just one question, Jim, have we, we're going to discuss traffic later on? Or?
Yes, we could. I see Bill Paley is here, though. He's the traffic engineer for BSC. He's certainly capable of answering any questions you may have at this time, but I know you just received that peer review response, so perhaps you want to wait for another evening.
Yeah, if I could suggest that, that might be helpful.
Dennis? Mr. Trevino, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Phil?
Not at this time.
Russ?
I'm good for now.
Liz?
I'm all set for now.
I have a concern, having been on this board for several years. I always think that we need to be very conservative in our approach to traffic. I think your numbers could be low, and I think that's something we want to address. Putting a development this size in the middle of Bellingham, literally square in the middle of town, and assuming it will have little or no impact, I want to make sure that that gets fully vetted. Does anyone in the public have any questions about traffic?
Paul Benetti, 65 Douglas.
Yes, sir.
What could you ask them if this was a physical traffic study, or was it just a computer traffic study?
You just asked them, they heard you, sir.
Well,
Their responses. Thank you for the question.
Okay, if I might respond, the traffic counts were conducted in the field when school was in session, and that was for the existing conditions. Then we adjusted them to future no-build conditions based on an annual growth rate, which I think is conservative for the area, 1% per year, which had 7.2% traffic going out 7 years in the future. Then the remaining units to be occupied in Lakeview Estates, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation rates coupled with the traffic study that was done for Lakeview. And then for our own site, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation information, and that information is based on real counts, empirical data at residential subdivisions.
could I ask one more?
Absolutely, sir.
So you're telling me the traffic study was conducted before the middle of February?
It was conducted actually last year.
Well, then it's old.
No, the state lets you use data up to 2 years old without much question. And in fact, given that right now traffic volumes really don't reflect normal, I'm working on a project in another town where they actually let me adapt 6-year-old volumes. I just applied an escalator factor to get them to present date.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
We do have one question from Janice. I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Janice Morowski, 2 Canale Drive. You'd mentioned that the traffic won't have a significant impact. Can you define?
That's what they claim, ma'am.
Second. Is this a significant 5 or 10 minutes to local residents? What does that mean?
Okay, the increase in delays is measured basically in numbers of seconds. The project won't add minutes of delay to the area. The difference would be what I'd call overall a shade of difference. The driving experience through the area won't be noticeably different overall.
Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that just briefly, we've never had a traffic engineer tell us that any project has any impact on any existing traffic. So that's kind of standard, standard par for the course. So I do want to sort of reserve this for later on, but just a quick question. How did you allocate the exit points? What was the percentage leaving on South Main? And
I don't have an exact percentage in my head, but the vast majority of the traffic was assigned to the South Main exit point, and that was based on the same factors I talked to you about before: the journey to work data, the internet-based directions to get to various destinations, judgment, the location of the units. Now, that being said, I think that loading that Main Street, South Main Street access point more is conservative because South Main Street is the street with traffic on it. It's a street where people are going to have to wait before they make a turn out onto South Main Street. Literally, the left turns can be subject to more delay because you have to watch for two directions of traffic on South Main Street. The other access point on Cross, there's very little traffic to compete with there, so level of service would be less likely to be an issue.
well, that's my point. I think that most people, once they get the lay of the land, is got to go out through Cross Street because South Main Street's a very heavily traveled road, and that the roads on Cross Street are perhaps not exactly conducive to a lot of travel. They're very winding roads and things like that. So I'm just interested in how those numbers were allocated, and we may, just based on our experience with that part of town, reconfigure the percentages based on just sort of practical considerations. Because if anyone's going to 495, they're not going on South Main Street, so they're going to go north, they're going to go where there's least traffic. And that on South Main Street is very, especially at rush hours, heavily traveled. But I do want to talk about this at some future date as well.
Any other questions from the public?
We'll have a few I see Melissa has a question.
Hi, I'm Melissa Valancourt, 99 Silver Lake Road. I had two questions. First was the logic of the sidewalk extents. I don't understand the benefit really to bringing a sidewalk just to Silver Lake Road and not any farther, like to the park or to Lake Street, which may be crazy, but there's nothing to do on Silver Lake Road. I live on it. I don't see why we're bringing people just to that point and not continuing them to some sort of a destination. So I was wondering if someone could speak to that.
Melissa, I think we're all going to your house for the party, but no, it's actually that I believe should go to the recreational area. That was within the $400,000 estimate from DPW. I think it just didn't translate onto the plan.
Okay,
but the thought was the residents being in proximity to the recreational area, it made sense to make that connection.
Okay, I think that's a good move then. And then my second question is the term open land, open space. I have pictures. I don't know if I can pull them up. That's fine if not. Open space, based on this other development that we all like to refer to, is an eyesore. Am I allowed to show a picture or no? Is that?
No, unfortunately, with
Okay.
this.
I'll email them to you. So it's a pile of excavate that's like miles high, a piece of concrete, like it's disgusting. That little light green area that was called open space on the site plan that's right by my house. It is a disgrace. And I'm pretty sure anyone who lives in this area can speak to that. There were actually children, I mean teenagers, playing in it a couple weeks ago into what is the retention pond. I know there's been numerous requests for a fence, which albeit it's going to be ugly when it's put in, but fine, we'll live with it. It's just embarrassing. So I want to understand a little bit more for the people who abut this future property. What is actually open space? Is it clear-cut land with giant piles of sand and, you know, concrete tubes lying around? Because that's what I've seen. So that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Melissa, if you noticed earlier, I asked Jim if that triangle can be cleaned up as part of this project. So that is one of our objectives, just to let you know.
I do appreciate that. I just want to.
We're not ignorant to that, and we're trying to do the best we can.
Yep.
And to the point of the other open space that they're discussing or showing on that plan, that is not the triangle. The board requested that, and I believe peer review also made note of it, the limit of disturbance is identified on the plan set now. And that pulls any kind of disturbance, so any kind of tree removal, any kind of disturbance of land outside of the open space. So that will be, you know, in a typical development, what the first step after they get permits is we do a walkthrough with myself and conservation, and we will literally have them with a rope roping off exactly where the limit of disturbance is, so that when they have a tree cutter come in, they see that bright orange snow fence and rope and what have you that says that's where we don't go by. So that's typically how it's done and how it should go.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I want to ask one question, sir. You talked about trip generation. Did you calculate buses into your trip generation?
The trip generation for the development includes all trips, all types. Again, those are derived from a pretty large database and collected at a number of locations. And they include whatever cars, trucks, buses happen to arrive or depart at the various sites.
Thank you for answering that. Jim, for the people in the public and the board members, we've discussed, this is a big project for the town. We would like to have a true public hearing on this as soon as we can. If we will obviously have to deal with social distancing rules that are in effect at that point in time. But I think it's prudent that we hear from the public in person and just not from the Zoom. So I just want to put that out there. That is one of our objectives as we go forward. And Jim, can you discuss how Lakeview Estates mitigation may impact this, if it impacts it at all?
Yeah, so that's something that I think we need to speak with the applicant about and maybe nail down prior to the next meeting. Lakeview Estates mitigation, as the board may be aware, though it was another board who permitted that one, has a lot of traffic mitigation, some of which would benefit this project significantly. So I believe it needs, and I believe the traffic study contemplates that being completed, that mitigation being completed. So just perhaps rolling in that mitigation into this, or some sort of confirmation that it gets done prior to, you know, a certain threshold. I think we need to work out before the next meeting, certainly.
One thing I did not do, forgive me, I did not take a motion to open the portion for the public that I had to do. Did I miss that?
No, you're all set. Actually, there's one more public question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Janice.
We talked just a moment ago about the open space and designating that area, but there's utility connections out to both Cross and Center Street that go through the open space zone. So how do those get repaired?
So those would be loamed over, grass seeded. Unfortunately, you can't really put trees over that because of the pipes underground and potential future access, but it would be revegetated.
And what this board has actually done in the past is once we get to that fine detail is potential conditioning of replanting plan that may, as Sean mentioned, you can't plant right over top, but what we've done sometimes is stagger in a V form so that you have it on either side and it grows out to kind of grow somewhat over to reduce that visual corridor.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Jim, do we need a motion to move forward to the 25th?
Yes, I just had a few comments, if I may. The truck plan, the discussion of the truck plan. I do have a little bit of a concern with that being with so much fill coming into the site and having trucks on using Cross Street as that main entry point. Maybe we do need to talk a little bit more about that first phase and how that gets opened up. All those trucks that are coming with fill, I'd imagine, are coming from the west of town, Kimball or whomever. So I think we do need to refine that a little bit more well before we get to the pre-construction period. Same thing with the SWIP. This board typically likes to see a draft SWIP in hand before any kind of approval, with the understanding that you're going to refine that with the contractor. But getting a good sense of what that SWIP would entail is critical. And same things in that SWIP would be, significant dust controls. A lot of things that we're learning from the project nearby. So significant dust controls, restoring any stockpile of material if it's not being used on X day. I know technically the law says after 2 weeks you need to stabilize those piles, but we know that typically it doesn't always get done. So if it's expressly written in our decision, it makes it a lot easier for me to wave it around and yell at the general contractor. Those things, let's see. And then one other thing in the phasing that was brought to my attention by conservation, so I just wanted the board to be aware. In phase one, it stipulates filling in that isolated wetland, but not providing the replication until phase two. I think we need to talk about that, how that gets played out in a more even fashion.
That's a good point.
And one other thing with the stormwater controls, the silt fence, there's some significant grades going on there. What we've learned from the neighboring property is that the silt fence with the wire back will withstand a significant amount of wind and stormwater. So I think that needs to be on the details. That's pretty much it for the moment.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the vice chairman suggested a site walk at some point in time. I was wondering what the thoughts were on a site walk. I would be very interested in seeing the 75-foot section during that. So are we restricted to do site walks until the governor opens things up? Or I guess what would be the thoughts from the chairman and maybe Jim?
I think it's a good idea, but I think all of us will have to address our comfort level with a site walk on an individual basis based on what the environment we're in right now.
And to that effect, I don't know, Sean, Jeff, if there's any ability to perhaps stake it or flag it or something, so that if the board members did want to do it maybe individually, it would be easily recognizable that, hey, there's bright orange flags being hung on, this represents this represents that. Go at your leisure so that they don't have to go in a group.
Can we just let's talk about it quickly then? We're happy to do that. It sounded like one focus area would be that 75-foot open space, or the open space boundary, including the areas where it would come within 75 feet of the site boundaries. So we can have that staked out. But I mean, let's be specific about what else you want staked out. Are there other areas of concern that everyone wants to see? I mean, we're talking about a wooded site here. I don't want to have to, I don't want to send our surveyors out there staking out everything unless board members actually want to go view it. That's all.
I think the buffer, certainly, the 75 and 100 foot running along South Main, Center, and Cross is definitely something. And also, I think it would be of the board's interest to stake out the entry points and probably the residents interested in it. I know there's a dirt path that's being kind of utilized right now, and I got a number of phone calls early on whether that was the main access road, and then in fact it's not. So that's going to be something that's going to need to be restored, later on. But so just staking out exactly where those two main entry points, I think, would be helpful.
Okay. We'll
I'd
have
like
that
to be able to visualize both the 100-foot buffer and the 75-foot buffer.
Okay.
Yeah, it also, if it's possible, where the large swath of open space would start.
So the limit of work on the east side of is that what you're talking about? The limit of work on the east side of the development?
Yeah, just so we have a sense of, okay, I'm here on the map, and this is what, to the right of this is going to be open space. The left of it is, that's a road, that kind of thing.
Right.
Just something that you can put yourself on the map.
And again, that'll be on an individual basis based on the board.
Right. I'll let Jim know as soon as we get the stakes up so that you can all get out there on your own. Right. That'd be great.
Do I have a motion to continue this to June 25th?
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I just interject here? So
absolutely, sir.
I thought we were talking about May 25th. So one of the issues that we've already had, one topic it sounds like the board wants to discuss further is the topic of traffic. So we've submitted a traffic report. We've presented it this evening. BSC has actually already peer reviewed it, and the BSC representative is here tonight. I understand the board might want more time to review their comments and digest the study, but I think we're ready to discuss that topic as soon as we can get back in front of the board. So, I mean, I was kind of hoping we could do that within the next couple of weeks. There's no reason to delay that any further. Most of these other items we can handle through our interactions with Jim and BSC, and I just want to keep this process moving.
May I offer a suggestion? Maybe there's a compromise there. I think the intent that the chairman was mentioning is that the board doesn't like to get too far ahead of conservation.
Absolutely.
We like to be in lockstep with them as we're going through stormwater and impacts and shifting of the road and what have you. But perhaps the June 11th meeting, so an in-between for the two, because you're not going to be in front of conservation until the 10th, so that's going to be your first real stab at it with them. So maybe the June 11th meeting, we can tackle some traffic and some other stuff, and then you'll have your comments from conservation. That will likely involve a lot of stormwater, and maybe on the June 25th, that's when we come together finally as the two boards.
Jim, in regards to a traffic study, I know the applicant wants to do it either in May or the first meeting in June. I did talk about having a true public hearing. And at that point, we will discuss traffic. So just because we'll discuss it prior to a true public hearing in June, it will still be discussed when the public is in attendance at a meeting.
Yeah, I'm not trying to preclude future discussion. I'm just trying to get as much feedback as we can so that we can continue to make progress here. That's all. So June 11th sounds like is a decent compromise, and
for the traffic, that's fine.
If I could make a suggestion as well, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the board, but if we could revisit the phasing as well. I'm a little uncomfortable with the phasing being so large. If that can be looked at again and broken up into smaller chunks, I think I would feel a little bit more comfortable with that. And if there's reasons why that can't happen or whatever, we can discuss that on the 11th as well.
But again, just to let you know, Brian, I still would like that discussed. at a true public hearing.
Right, yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all, but I just don't want the phasing part of it to, I just want to revisit the phasing part of it.
That's fine. Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, so I'll move to continue the meeting, public hearing until June 11th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor of continuing until June 11th, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And thank you very much to the public. We do have some more items to discuss, just to let the public know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Jim, can you bring us up to speed on 186 Maple Street?
Yep. So, sorry. Yeah. So 186 Maple Street definitive subdivision. So that, as you recall, is an outstanding subdivision before the board that is closely tied to the solar development at 186 Maple Street. The agreement was 186 Maple Street subdivision would be withdrawn at the time the appeal of the building permit for the ground-mounted solar expires. I talked to the engineer today for the solar development, and they have submitted the building permit this morning, and I talked to the building inspector who plans on issuing that permit fairly soon, which means the 30 days will be triggered as soon as he issues that. So that lines up fairly nicely with our July 9th meeting. So our July 9th meeting would mean that the building permit was issued, 30 days has expired, and everyone's done what everyone agreed upon, and it was formally withdrawn. Again, the withdrawal means that the underlying zoning is formally reverted to what town meeting unanimously voted for as suburban.
Do I have a motion to continue this to the July 9th meeting?
So moved.
Phil.
Do I have a second? There's a motion on the floor to continue this July 9th. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Jim. The 140 corridor study?
Excellent. Yeah. So this is so just to refresh everyone's memory, this corridor study was a result of the permitting process of the Lincoln Properties Mechanic Street warehouse, the ongoing warehouse that anyone who takes a ride down Mechanic Street is going to see clearly being operated on and constructed on. I took a drive-in today, and it's a pretty impressive project. However, through that process, we received mitigation to conduct a corridor study. I reached out to BSC, who's done a lot of work for the town, as you guys know, and is very familiar with the corridor. They helped us out with the Lincoln Properties traffic analysis. So they have been, over the past about 6 months or so, been sifting through all the data. Met out on site on the corridor a couple times now. All the different departments have had an ability to weigh in. And so this before you, I know that you have a draft study before you, and Mike from BSC has put together a brief presentation, which I know I sent out in advance, so you can take a be able to sift through it. But I'll bring it up now, Mike, and you're able to unmute, right? You guys are good.
Okay.
Excellent. And here we are. Everybody see that one okay?
Fine.
Excellent. Let me pull all the way up. There we go. All right, Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim. Thank you, everybody. My name is Mike Santos. I'm a traffic engineer at BSC, along with Bill Paley, who's also attending the meeting. So I'm just gonna kind of go over pretty quickly what we've done to date. We've prepared this corridor study for Mechanic Street. You know, this came about as a result the warehouse study. It's part of their mitigation. So first of all, we'll just go over why this study is, you know, why the town felt the study was needed. I think the warehouse study is going to put a significant amount of traffic on Mechanic Street. You know, I think they're going to add a traffic signal, and along with that, you know, the town has also identified and you know, explored some other potential development sites on Mechanic Street. So, you know, right now it's kind of in rough shape. There's some traffic issues out there, some safety issues. We looked at pedestrian and bicycle facilities. We also looked at, you know, the amount of traffic that will be generated by the warehouse and any other future developments that will be, you know, that could potentially be built on Mechanic Street. You know, one of the things that we tried to do with this study is keep in mind that, you know, this will probably be you know, if our recommendations move forward, there will probably be some MassDOT funding. So we wanted to, you know, put together some recommendations that, you know, can be funded and implemented, you know, in the event that, you know, you need MassDOT funding. So that, you know, that includes incorporating complete streets principles, you know, staying consistent with their bike plans and pedestrian plans. You can go to the next one. So just as an overview, the corridor that we studied is about 2/3 of a mile. It basically goes from Blackstone Street in the west to the intersection of Maple Street in the east, all the way to the Franklin town line. You know, as most of you probably know, it's a major commuter route. There's extremely heavy traffic volumes in the eastbound direction during the morning, and then again the reverse in the evening. You know, it's one of the primary routes for people to get to the commuter rail station into 495. We also took a look at the cluster of signals in the town center. We didn't really focus too much on that during the study, as you know, that's being designed right now. But we did look at the analysis of those intersections to see if, you know, the proposed recommendations and the design will work. Right now, the right-of-way dates back to the early 1900s. It's 60 to 80 feet wide, so there's a good amount of space. We can go to the next slide. So to date, you know, we started out meeting with the town, just, you know, Jim and other staff members, police and fire and engineering, just to get their sense on, you know, what some of the issues are out there. We did visit the corridor to do some field visits, take some photographs. We walked the corridor with Jim just to kind of get a feel for what some of the other issues might be, so we don't overlook anything. We looked at some existing traffic volume data. We didn't do any traffic counts for this. We used what was done as part of the warehouse study. I think those were conducted in 2018, so they're pretty new. You know, we identified all of the existing issues, including traffic operations, safety, pedestrian facilities, bike facilities. We worked with the town on identifying what can be built out there. Some of the other sites that are kind of undeveloped or could be redeveloped. At the end of this presentation, we'll show you a couple of concepts that we came up with that can address most of these issues that we've identified. And, you know, right now we're in the final thing. We're just presenting this to the town boards. Any additional input would be great. So just to start off, this is Mechanic Street. It's basically two lanes, one lane in each direction. There are really not any sidewalks throughout the corridor, except for around Blackstone Street, and then towards the east side, around the commercial area to the east. So pedestrian facilities are lacking here, and, you know, with the potential developments, that was one of the key issues we tried to address. Go to the next one. So we'll just go through what we found. As I just said, there's not much in the way of pedestrian facilities. Jim, you can click through so you can see. We'll go back. So there's really no sidewalks anywhere. And from what we heard, there is some, some people do walk from kind of towards Blackstone Street and even the town center all the way down to this area. There's not a lot of pedestrian activity, but that could change in the future with what might be built out here. And again, nothing's ADA compliant. Where there are sidewalks, they're kind of crumbling, except, with the exception of towards the east side of the corridor that was recently rebuilt. So there's pretty good facilities there. Again, major commuter corridor. This is just a picture that we shot. This is in the morning. This is the eastbound approach at Maple Street, right near the rapid refill. This was one of the major points of congestion that we looked at. As you know, this was recently reconstructed. And when we went out there, it was under construction. I think one of the issues was that the detection may not have been installed yet. So, we're hoping that this congestion will kind of clear itself up a little bit. It's still going to be a major commuter route, so there's still going to be some levels of congestion. But what we were seeing is queues that would back up a couple thousand feet and take 3 to 4 cycles to clear through. So here, so another thing that we saw was, Jim, you can click on just one more. So right here, on the right side, you see the intersection of Mechanic and Maple Street. You have the rapid refill with the Dunkin' Donuts there. So there's a lot of activity in the morning. The other, it's adjacent to this retail parcel with stores and restaurants. And one of the things that we saw is that there's a lot of interaction between those two sites, yet there's no way to get from one to the other without actually going out onto Mechanic Street and just driving like 500 feet. So that was one of the issues that we saw with access. And the second one is more relevant for future development. So as you'll see in a later slide, we identified basically where that oval is and all of the parcels to the south. Those could see some, a good amount of development there, including retail, residential, maybe some office. It could be a good mix. So we identified this location as, we can kind of clean up the access points and reduce. I think there are probably like 6 or 7 access points to all the individual parcels. I think those can be consolidated into 2 locations. We can go to the next one. Safety. So you can just do one more click. So, we looked at MassDOT crash data for a 5-year period. The 3 hot spots, probably not a surprise, at Maple Street, at Blackstone Street, and in the town center. There is that project at Maple Street, which hopefully will clear up some of the safety issues and clear up some of the congestion. The same thing at the town center. And then again at Blackstone Street, there's some sight distance issues that we saw there. And there is some significant congestion, especially during the morning, for people traveling north. I assume they're coming from South Main Street to Blackstone Street to go east. There was 1 fatality there. So, we're going to look at safety issues at that intersection as well. As I just said, there's some sight distance issues. It's mostly due to vertical curvature. So what you can see here on the top is a plan view with Blackstone Street on the left, Maple Street on the right. I don't know if you can really see the text too much, but if you see the red and yellow areas, those are areas where there's not enough proper sight distance based on the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. So all of those locations do not have adequate sight distance. There's a couple ways to fix that. One is obviously to reconstruct the entire road. The other is to, put some warning signs or devices to alert people that there's going to be driveways and traffic signals and other activity. So that was one thing that we looked at. As I said, a couple other issues. Bike facilities don't really exist here. There's some bike lanes at the intersection of Maple Street, but they don't really connect to anything. After talking with Jim, one of the goals is to connect to other bike facilities in the area, especially the one to the south, it's the Southern New England trunk line that kind of runs in an east-west direction through a few towns, and then also out to the commuter rail station. Another thing that we saw was the physical condition of the roads. They're pretty deteriorated. Pavement markings are faded. There's some issues with drainage, which I think are related to, there's not the curbing out there. It looks like the road's just been paved over, and now the curb is, maybe an inch or two where it should be a lot higher. So those are some of the issues that we found. Just to go back to potential development sites. So what we did in the traffic study, we took all of the traffic volumes from the warehouse traffic study. We built them into the future, 7 years. We added the 1% growth. I mean, this is kind of basically the same methodology that you just saw with the previous presentation. And then what we did is we looked at what could possibly be built on all of these locations. So the number 1 represents the warehouse site. So that is happening. As you can see on the bottom, 6 through 10, we looked at what could possibly be built there. That was information given to us from the town. Then there's a cluster of developments. There's a couple in Franklin on West Central Street that we also incorporated. And then there's a couple of sites just on the north side of the Mechanic Maple Street intersection that could see some additional development. So we incorporated all of the traffic from that and projected it out 7 years from now. That timeline can change. That's just so we were able to account for enough traffic growth. So I'll just get right into our designs, because this is kind of the meat of the study. So we came up with 2 different options. Both of them include upgraded pedestrian facilities. Both of them include upgraded roadway, upgraded roadway. I just want to point out one thing. So as part of the warehouse study, some of their mitigation will also be to build a sidewalk from their new traffic signal, which is going to be to the east of Blackstone Street. And they're going to connect that sidewalk to the east, where there's an existing sidewalk that runs in front of 190 Mechanic Street. So that sidewalk is incorporated into our plans, but I just want to let you know that will be funded separately by the proponent of the warehouse project. So this first option shows sidewalk on the north side. So the left side of the screen is the north side of the road. The right side is going to be the south side. So what we have is we have the sidewalk, which will be constructed either way, 2 drive lanes, and then on the south side, where there could be potential, additional development, we are showing a shared use path, which will, accommodate bikes and pedestrians alike. The dimensions could change by a couple of feet here and there once you get into the final design, but this is a 50-foot cross section. As I said, the right of way is a minimum of 60 feet, so this can fit within the right of way pretty easily. Probably have to shift some curb lines here and there. So we'll just go through this. This is kind of the detailed plan view starting from Blackstone Street in the west, and this will be a couple feet that go off to the east. So right at Blackstone Street, we found some capacity issues there. There's a pretty heavy right turn movement in the eastbound direction, and looking at the right of way, we felt that it's possible to add a short right turn lane there that can kind of add a little bit of capacity to help out. It's not too drastically, but I think that might help out a little bit. One thing we're going to do is upgrade all of the pavement markings and signal equipment here. This intersection, we're recommending that this be interconnected with the future signal at the warehouse driveway. I think you'd see some benefit from coordinating those 2 traffic signals, especially because this is the area where there's some sight distance issues, and you really want to kind of prevent people from having to stop when there are sight distance issues. So that's something that we'll do. Again, on the south side, you see the shared use path extending from Blackstone Street to the east. We're proposing to reconstruct all of Mechanic Street. With that, you'll get some drainage improvements. You'll get the upgraded pavement better pavement markings. This will be, we're recommending full depth reconstruction, so it's not just a resurfacing of the road. This is a full depth reconstruction that should last, decades. You can go to the next one. And again, as we go to the east, you see on the left side of this graphic, we're showing the proposed warehouse driveway. We're not showing it go into the site, we're just showing the location of it. And as I said, on the south side, you can see the scattering of parcels. There are all these, small parcels that can be built. And, we're recommending to the planning board, if any of those projects go forward, I think that you'd benefit significantly if they can sort of be developed together as much as possible. If they are, you can kind of have some control over site access. So again, you can provide a couple access points to all of those parcels. Obviously, one obvious location would be opposite the warehouse driveway, so you can incorporate that right into the signal. You can put a left turn lane there if needed. Again, these are design elements that'll have to be determined as other developments come on board. But based on what we saw, you can put a left turn lane there as well. And then the second point of access would be towards the eastern side of those parcels. That's in a pretty good location for the site distance issues as well. And as we go further to the east, we're recommending just installing some crosswalks where they're missing, upgrading all of the curb ramps where they're not ADA compliant, and that's most of them. But again, this area has recently been reconstructed, so it's actually in pretty good shape. We're not making too many recommendations here. There's a short little pocket that goes into the rapid refill. It's not really striped or anything, so we're just recommending having, delineating and defining that a little bit better. I know there's a lot of activity there during the morning. Again, the shared use path will continue through the frontage of this retail plaza. Eventually, it'll have to end in front of the rapid refill, where then it can just be converted into a bike lane, which currently exists at the intersection of Maple Street, and then continue on to any other future bike facilities that might be built or installed. So that was the first option. That's with the shared use path. This is the second one. This is more of a standard design that you'll see. It's just 2 standard sidewalks and 2 drive lanes and 2 shoulders. So right now there really aren't any shoulders on Mechanic Street at all. What we're doing is we're installing 5-foot shoulders that meets the requirements that you'll need for complete streets and bike facilities. Even if you're not expecting a lot of bike activity here, it's still something that, especially if you're getting funded through MassDOT, that they'll look for. A lot of the other elements are the same. The cross section is a little different. You see the same improvements here at Blackstone Street with the right turn lane, the same connection to the proposed traffic signal at the warehouse. But you'll see on the south side, we have a bike lane. There's a buffer there just to give it a little bit more, give bikes a little bit more room. It also serves as a shoulder as well. So this is, it's pretty much the same as the last concept that we showed, except for the bike lanes are carried through, separated by a buffer. And we're not making any preferences for one option or the other. I think this is up to the town to decide. Both will work, and I think both are going to provide good bike and pedestrian connectivity. So the next steps we're going to do is we're going to continue to work with the town, collect some input, maybe even input from tonight. We did some cost estimates, so in total, depending on the option, it's going to range from $3 to $3.5 million. That includes the full depth of reconstruction. It doesn't include any subsurface utility work like replacement of water lines or wastewater lines or anything like that. That estimate also includes work that will be funded by the warehouse developer, the sidewalk and signal upgrades and other stuff that they're doing. So that's it, and finally, once we kind of get a couple good concepts after we, sift through any input that we get, we'll work with the town to figure out how to actually get this funded. It'll probably, I expect that it'll be a combination of mitigation funds from future development, and also, putting together some funding mechanisms for in terms of grants from the state or other, government agencies. So that's about it. Welcome any questions or input or anything else.
Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
One thing I will add, as Mike touched on, much of this is going to be related to mitigation. Obviously, the town, doesn't have funds to put down 3.5 to redo Mechanic Street, but as we all know, there's significant areas for redevelopment, as Mike showed on the aerials, and so this is really a plan that we can really take and just hand off to developers that are interested in coming to town and say, this is what we're expecting. So we can move that process along pretty well with a well-researched, well-planned corridor.
Mike, how far are you from a final draft?
This is pretty final. I mean, the only thing that we have to do is this is kind of the start of the public input process. So what we're going to do is, and obviously anybody that lives in the town might have some other suggestions that we don't know about. I mean, I don't live in Bellingham, so we'll incorporate any other input or take any other suggestions that people have and plug that into the study. But the study is pretty much a final draft. I would say it's like 95% done. The only thing that we have to do is, go through this public process and then add anything that we need to add. But the concepts are done. We can always update them if something else comes out that the town would like to see. But yeah, the draft is pretty complete.
Any questions from the board?
If you don't mind, Bill, Mike, in terms of your observations, what do you think is the number one or the biggest problems that the town faces in that corridor right now? What's the priority?
Well, right. There are some problems that I think that these concepts can address. I think other problems, such as the level of traffic that you see, just the congestion level, the commuter traffic is, that's pretty important. That's one of the biggest things that I saw. But again, that's constrained by the signalized intersections, and Maple Street was just recently reconstructed. So I don't really think that we're going to get a lot of additional capacity to help that. But that's certainly one. As I said, there's no pedestrian facilities here at all. And, right now that might not be an issue so much because you're not seeing a lot of pedestrian activity. But this, especially in the future, when you start to see more developers come in, if they look to install, put in residential, that's going to be a huge issue. So that, those are the big things. And I think just the condition of the roadway width is not sufficient. It's torn up. I think that you have some drainage issues. So if you go to the west of where the retail plaza is, the grade kind of dips down and then it kind of dips back up. And from what Jim told me and other folks at the town told me, when it rains a lot, it floods them. And that's another issue that we have to address. So I think with this, we'll put in some proper drainage to deal with that. So those are the big things. With any project like this, we also look to implement complete streets. So we're gonna look to do some bike facilities here. It might not be a huge priority for this corridor, but that's something that we have to look at too, because that doesn't exist. But I think that the level of traffic and the lack of pedestrian facilities are probably the biggest issues. And access management is going to be important for the future too.
Is there anything that the town can do about capacity or the level of traffic, or what would that entail?
Well, maybe have a pandemic hit. No, I'm kidding. But I don't know. It's just a major commuter route without any other way to get to the Forge Park station and to 495. I just don't really see you. I mean, you basically have to move traffic from Mechanic Street to another roadway, but the reality is Mechanic Street is the corridor that people use. So I don't know if you can really reduce the amount of traffic there. As far as capacity, I mean, I think that the improvements at Maple Street have been put in. I mean, without expanding capacity there, I mean, without putting like an additional through lane, I don't think that you're gonna do too much in terms of capacity. So I think that's just something that is a matter of fact of life rather than
So,
reducing
Mike,
the amount of traffic.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in essence, we're a town that's no longer small. That our infrastructure was designed and laid out as a very small town. And we've grown around those roads, and those roads have never been adapted to meet our increased population. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the roads, I mean, we were looking back at some of the right of way, and these roads were laid out over a century ago. And they still follow the same alignment, and they have the same capacity, and they have the same right of way. So, yeah, I mean, I think the fortunate thing you have is you do have a good right of way width for any, for work like this.
Okay.
But
Bill, if I could just ask one more question. Mike, as we turn our eyes to other projects that are going in or coming off of that road, particularly the large residential project that's pending before us, what concerns or what should we be looking for? What issues should we be aware of?
Well, as with any development project, the things that I would look for, and even for the one that you just saw earlier tonight, I mean, I would look for capacity is always an issue, and I know that there were a couple comments about that, but like I said, there's really only so much you can do without really making streets like this a kind of like a highway. But I would always be looking for safety. Safety number one. Making sure that they can get in and out of the sites easily, reducing the conflicts. Like I said, if you go back and look at the map, there's like 6 or 7 parcels on the south side of Mechanic Street. If you have all of those developed individually and independent of each other, with each one going through its individual planning board review, you're going to see 7 driveways all jammed in close together. And that is going to cause a lot of conflicting movements and create major safety issues. So that's one thing that I would look at. That's probably the priority when you're looking at these developments, and any development that comes out here as well.
And one good thing, Brian, is that with any future development, this board, and if it's the zoning board or whatever board it may be, we have the ability to utilize our peer review engineers to help us with traffic, and BSC is one of our traffic engineer peer review pre-qualified engineers. So they've now had a full 6-7 months on the corridor, so they should be prepared and ready to provide us with those tips as the developments come.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you can look to is, because a lot of the transportation infrastructure is outdated, especially when it's town owned, and it can be kind of piecemeal, and there's a lot of like traffic signal equipment gets outdated, it stops working. You can look to these developers to upgrade things that need upgrading, and these are basic kind of maintenance things that might not be a priority for the town, but you can take advantage of the developers to solve some existing problems out there too.
We're good at that.
May I ask a question? You get two proposals. Blackstone is the school corridor there.
Yeah.
You've got one that's kind of a dual use. The other one's got sidewalks. How does the school zone play into that? I'm thinking like middle school, the high school's right there. libraries right there. Does the schools provide one or the other as being more valuable?
How old are the kids that are going to the school?
Middle school age,
Okay.
high school.
That's
Well-
so Mike, that's the, on Blackstone, that's the one with the, middle school and high school. And that's
Okay.
one of the main reasons why we brought it out to Blackstone was,
Yeah.
that connection point of, it's a shame that there's not walkable, the ability to walk to the schools from, any direction on Mechanic Street there.
So I guess, this is just my opinion. But I think with a shared use path, so assuming it's a nice day and you have some kids that ride their bike to school, I don't know if they're going to be riding up and down this corridor, but I think with the shared use path really gives you a higher level of comfort, especially if you have like children and maybe not a lot of experience or awareness in riding the bike. It gives you a much higher level of safety for both walking and riding. I'm not really sure if there's anything else that I can think about. They're both pretty similar, but I think that would give children and probably parents a better level of comfort with riding their bikes through this corridor. And that goes for anywhere. And you can do either option here, but I think that would probably be that's just my thoughts on it.
Anyone else? Great presentation. Thank you.
Welcome.
And you can work with us to get more public input. Jim, how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'll be working with Mike and Bill on perhaps getting a little bit more public input, posting it on the web, sending it out email blasts, and see if there's any additional comments we can get. I know there are a lot of business owners in the area that may want to chime in as well.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Welcome. Appreciate it.
Jim, can we talk about, bring us up to speed on the economic subcommittee?
Yeah, so the economic subcommittee and the other item on the agenda, the discussion item for parking relief, they kind of merged together there. So so over the past few weeks, as this whole COVID-19 thing has progressed, the selectmen through the local emergency action committee has put together a subcommittee regarding economic development. So looking at our business community, looking at our local economy and saying, what can we do to help you? This economic development subcommittee is established with 2 selectmen, 1 planning board member. We snagged the chairman, a board of health agent representative, as well as 1 member of the business community. And then we also have a number of staff that are assisting. So it's myself, Tim Icardi from building, Mark Poirier from the fire department, deputy fire chief, Bruce Wilson, board of health agent, and Dennis Frayne, town administrator, all kind of putting our heads together to try and figure out, what can we do to assist our local economy, but also doing it safely, obvious, and timely. We're monitoring the state's plan, their phasing plan for the economy. Obviously, as you guys know, if you've been following along, not a whole lot has come out other than that there is a phasing plan. So what we've been doing to date is working with businesses that have been closed or have been closed for now, but have an opportunity perhaps to open up, to work with them on getting going, getting ready, and when they get a green light, they can move and act immediately as opposed to waiting and getting bogged down. We've pivoted a little bit and started really targeting restaurants, understanding that the data out there shows that most states and most kind of counties and regional areas are kind of waiting to open up restaurants. And I guess that makes sense from the interior side of things. We don't want large groups banding together. But you know, we looked at it and said we don't want to leave anyone really behind. So what is some creative ways in which we can assist restaurants, you know, as this progresses? And one way that we looked at it is understanding that there's going to be limited capacity inside. Perhaps there's an opportunity outside. So, you know, New England, we have short summers, so we need to act now because the summer is probably gone in 2 days. So, so what we've been doing is working with all the different restaurants. We sent out direct contacts to all the restaurants in the area about if there's an opportunity for you to expand your capacity outside, again, safely and within the parameters of CDC and Department of Health, then we want to work with you. We want to hear from you. So it is creative. It is different. You know, there you could potentially see seating in areas you wouldn't expect. You know, sides of restaurants where maybe there was parking at one point. Now there's planters and tables. So, you know, we're working with each of the different restaurants. We've actually got a lot of good feedback from the restaurants specifically that are eager and excited to do it. We found out quickly that, you know, there are some barriers in place that we're working around, that being things like, you know, parking relief or liquor licenses. The liquor licenses are very specific as to what you can and can't do. So, you know, we need to work through those. But specifically in terms of parking relief, I thought it would be important to bring it to this board's attention and get your guys' input on it. The ask is really that this board would vote in support of that relief. And it wouldn't be in a way that we would just be carte blanche giving such as a special permit or anything to all restaurants. But we're really looking at this as a temporary event. You know, something that has hard deadlines of, you know, now until, I don't know, October 1st or something of that nature, where, so you got the summer months to try and, you know, recoup some of that lost revenue that these restaurants are sorely need. So, you know, this obviously wouldn't be just go out and fill your parking lot with tables. We actually have the inspection team of the staff that I mentioned that are going to be going out to each individual one that wants to take part in this, making sure that fire lanes are protected, making sure the ADA compliance is represented, and, you know, all other safety measures are still there. So, you know, I'm really looking for your input and support if you so choose to support the effort.
Jim, can I just speak as being a member of that committee? We're going to look at each application and restaurant individually. I don't want to designate certain restaurants, but when you get into North Bellingham, in the area near Walmart, there are some restaurants that if you were to expand their seating capacity, you'd be encroaching into a fire lane or an exit on the parking lot. So what our goal is to do this safely, so we don't have people sitting in areas where traffic would normally drive through. It's simply setting up part of an existing parking lot or outside seating adjacent to the building so they can expand their operations temporarily. We're not going to put anyone, you know, potentially on a sidewalk or in a parking lot that is shared amongst other businesses, or, as I said, fire lanes. Is that a fair assessment of our goals, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. And also it should be noted that it's not tomorrow. It's when the governor gives the release for restaurants to consume on site. So it's not overstepping the state, but basically preparing and being proactive for when the state gives the green light. These restaurants might be able to recoup some of that lost revenue.
And just to let the board know, with our MASS program and our economic development subcommittee, we've been 2 weeks ahead of the state
Yeah,
Just look away, Jim.
yeah, essentially.
And the state has copied Jim's red light, yellow light, green light concept. They had what, a blue light or something.
Yeah, maybe
So
something.
Jim's concept has been copied statewide, just to let you know. Do I have a motion to support that addition?
Can I just ask a quick question about
Sure.
compliance? So I know you have your inspection committee. Are you going to be spot checking these places to make sure that patrons and, obviously the restaurants, I would think the restaurants will be compliant, but, there could be rogue patrons who don't want to follow the rules and cause problems. How does compliance work?
Yep. Yeah. So actually, so it's twofold, but so restaurants already have somewhat strict compliance regulations. Board of Health is routinely going out there already. So this actually adds just another level and another handful of folks that are going to be keeping a mindful eye on it. But in addition, there's not only from the local level, we have our checklist of things they have to adhere to, which is essentially the list that the Department of Public Health has provided. But the Department of Public Health also has that. So yeah, there will be routine periodics that we already are doing, but we would likely have to ramp that up a little bit more given the situation.
So, Jim, if I could ask you a question. So this is not an official delegation or authorization. It's more of a symbolic show of support for the actions taken. Is that
Exactly right. Yeah. So it really supports, myself and inspectional services that are kind of, we don't typically just hand out temporary event permits or anything like that. And so, this is really understanding that the town supports these efforts and that, we're obviously not going to be handing them out just like candy, but that, there's a process in place and a team in place.
How would you want the motion to read?
I think just simply supporting the town of Bellingham's effort to support restaurants during the COVID pandemic and to support these temporary events, temporary restaurant event, outdoor seating events during the summer months to support our local economy or something of that nature. That would, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? I lost my.
Yep. Bill, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Good.
A motion on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passes. Jim, the minutes. We need a motion to approve the minutes from April 23rd meeting.
Yes, please, if the board is comfortable with them.
We all had a chance to read them. And a great job by Amy, by the way. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Accepting the minutes as written. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
What else, Jim, do you have?
That's it for this evening.
Jim, before we adjourn, can you try to get an update Bonvie project?
Yeah, I certainly
Our next
can.
meetings.
The last we left it, they were before conservation for delineation of the driveway or the wetlands near the proposed driveway. They're still there now, but yeah, I could certainly bring a fresh update at the next meeting.
So
Can
wait,
you
did he
coordinate
say,
that with the Board of Selectmen?
Pardon?
Can you
did he say
coordinate with the
Bonvie?
Selectmen?
I'm sorry, both of you talking.
Can you coordinate that with the Selectmen?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I missed the name of the project. Was it
Bonvie. Yeah, Bonvie, New England Country Club. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Awesome job, guys. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.